The first sign something was off wasn't the message. It was the silence. The kind of silence you only hear after someone detonates your life and calmly walks away. It didn't knock. It seeped in through the walls, through my inbox, through the blinking green light on the modem that refused to die, even when everything else in the apartment felt unplugged. The message came at 2:03 p.m. I know that because I've stared at the timestamp more times than I've blinked today. Wedding is off. Expect a call from my lawyer. I didn't respond right away. Not because I was stunned, but because I wasn't. And that terrified me. Instead, I stood barefoot on our kitchen tiles, clutching a spoonful of peanut butter midair like I was frozen in a bad commercial for heartbreak. Her cat. Yeah, her cat. Rubbed against my ankle like it hadn't just witnessed the quiet burial of our engagement over text. I didn't text back. I opened the drawer where we kept all our important papers, pulled out the mortgage folder, sat down at my laptop, and deleted my name from the joint application. It took 5 minutes. No security questions. No final warning. Just click. I went back to the spoon of peanut butter, ate it, sat in silence, and waited. By 6 p.m. that evening, there were 5 missed calls from a number I didn't recognize. I Googled it. It was a law office with a stock photo of a smiling man in a suit who looked like he sold car insurance part-time. I didn't answer. The next morning, I got an email from a Mr. Garland E. Huxley requesting a conversation about pending contractual implications regarding the canceled nuptials. His tone was polite, but there was a twitch beneath the words, like someone pretending the building wasn't on fire while holding a damp match. I replied with exactly 2 sentences. I have no pending contracts with your client. Please direct all communication elsewhere. 2 hours later, the voicemail started sounding different. Stressed. Rushed. Legal words started mixing with emotional ones. That's when it hit me. She hadn't told him. Not about me removing my name. Not about the loan. Not about the deposit I fronted solo that would now be unrecoverable if my name wasn't on record. Not about the fact that her plan only worked if I stayed quiet and compliant. But I didn't scream. I didn't call friends. I didn't post anything. I just waited. Because I knew Rena. And Rena had no idea that I knew what she'd done. No idea that I'd found the receipt from the luxury hotel in Albany 3 weeks ago. No idea I'd seen the name Bo scrawled in pen on the back of her yoga receipt. No idea that my silence was not weakness, it was setup. So when her lawyer called again at 4:17 p.m. that afternoon, he didn't leave a voicemail. He just hung up. And 5 minutes later, she texted. But this time, it wasn't cold. Can we talk? When Rena's text finally came, can we talk? I stared at it for a while, letting the words bleed, meaning the longer I looked. It was so short, so vague, like it had been ripped from a stack of post-breakup scripts. But the thing is, this wasn't a breakup. This was an execution, and she had pulled the trigger hours ago. I didn't reply, not because I wanted to be cruel, but because I knew that the longer I stayed silent, the more she'd unravel. Rena hated not being in control, and for once, the wheel wasn't in her hands. I went about my evening in the most ordinary ways. I reheated leftovers that tasted like cardboard, fed her cat, because of course he was still here, and sat down with the TV on mute just to hear something that wasn't my own thoughts. Every buzz from my phone made my chest tighten, but I never picked it up, and the messages kept coming, every single one more desperate than the last. I think we made a mistake. I didn't mean to say it like that. My lawyer said you removed yourself from the loan. Why would you do that? You're ruining everything. There it was. Not we. Not this hurts. Not I'm sorry. Just you're ruining everything. Classic Rena. Still thinking this was a game she could reset if she pressed the right button. But I wasn't playing anymore. The next morning, she showed up at my apartment. I knew she would. I'd taken the day off work, sensing this storm was going to need my full attention. I didn't even flinch when I heard the knock. I just waited a second longer than I should have, then opened the door. She looked off. Not destroyed. Not disheveled. But she had that wide-eyed, falsely calm expression I'd seen her wear whenever she was 2 seconds away from losing it completely. Her mouth opened as if to speak, but I stepped aside without a word and let her in. She didn't waste time. I was angry, she blurted, standing in the middle of my living room like the space itself offended her. You weren't listening. You weren't showing up. I didn't speak. I sat down and looked at her like I was watching a scene play out on stage. And maybe I was. Maybe all of this was just one big, self-directed monologue where I wasn't even in the cast anymore. She paced. You can't just pull your name off the mortgage. That's not how this works. We signed things. They already did inspections. The bank called me 3 times. Still, I said nothing. And don't act like you didn't care, she snapped suddenly. You begged me to pick that house. You said it was the one. I let her spiral, the words tumbling out like beads from a snapped necklace. She didn't notice I wasn't arguing, that I wasn't defending myself, that I was listening, but not in the way she wanted. Because this wasn't about saving anything. This was about confirmation. You said the wedding was off. I finally spoke. My voice didn't shake, even though everything inside me was still trembling like a fault line. You said expect a call from your lawyer. So I did what anyone would do. I let go. She looked like I'd slapped her. But not because of the words, because they didn't give her an opening. I only said that because I knew it would get your attention, she shouted, her voice cracking. You've been so passive. You always act like things will fix themselves. I needed a reaction. Now it was my turn to feel stunned. You sabotaged the entire wedding and the house just to get a reaction? She hesitated. It wasn't sabotage. It was pressure. I thought if I pushed hard enough, you'd finally show up. And what about Albany? I asked, quietly. Her face dropped. What? She whispered. The hotel room. The signed receipt. Room 412. The same weekend I was at that family thing in Cleveland. Remember? Dead silence. No wind. No movement. Just her blinking at me like the room had suddenly tilted. I don't know what you're talking about, she said, but her voice was flatter than the denial deserved. You stayed with someone. Beau. I don't know who he is yet, but I will. She sat down then. For the first time, she looked small. Not angry. Not manipulative. Just shrinking. Her armor was paper now, and it had started to burn. And I hadn't even told her about Nolan yet. Because Nolan? He hadn't said everything in that first call. What he said next would change everything. Not just how I saw Irina, but how I saw myself. And the worst part? He wasn't the only one who knew. The thing about betrayal is that it doesn't arrive all at once. It creeps in, layer by layer, peeling back everything you thought was solid until you're left staring at a version of your life you don't recognize anymore. That's how I felt when Rena sat on my couch, wordless, shrinking into herself after I mentioned the name Beau. That moment should have been the climax. But it wasn't. It was the prelude to something far worse. She left not long after. No dramatic outburst, no apology, no explanation, just a pale, quiet exit with a mumbled, I need to think. I didn't stop her. I just watched the door click shut and stood there for a full minute, not moving. It was like trying to breathe underwater. And then I called Nolan. He answered on the second ring, as if he'd been waiting. You okay? He asked. It was strange. He had the voice of someone who'd already mourned for me. Like he knew what I didn't. Not really, I said honestly. You said she'd been planning something. He exhaled sharply. Yeah, I wasn't sure if I should even call, but I guess I saw enough to know you deserve the truth. I work in the same department as Rena. We're not friends, but we used to be friendly. She changed a few months ago. Started showing up late, sneaking off during breaks. Then one day, I caught her in the conference room. I didn't want to hear what came next, but I didn't stop him. She was with Beau. He doesn't even work with us. He's some startup guy she met at a mixer. They weren't just talking. I walked in on them making out on the company's time. Man, she saw me. We locked eyes. And you know what she said? He paused, and I could almost hear him cringe on the other end of the line. She said, you didn't see anything. Just like that. Deadpan. And then she laughed. My skin went cold. He kept going. That was the moment I knew something was off. Then I started connecting dots. She mentioned a wedding, your name, the house. She was bragging that you were boring but reliable, that you had great credit, that she'd be set up for life. I couldn't speak. My mouth opened, but nothing came out. My heart didn't beat faster, it slowed, as if conserving energy for impact. I confronted her a week later, Nolan continued. Told her I wasn't comfortable with what I saw. That if she was using you, she should just leave. She didn't take it well. Said I was just jealous. Said you were nothing without her. I didn't realize my hand had curled into a fist until my fingers started to ache. She said the plan was to marry you, secure the house under her name if possible, and then, her words, not mine, figure things out after the honeymoon. I finally found my voice, though it was faint. Why are you telling me this? There was a pause. Because I've been used too, man. Not by her. But I've seen people like her. And you seem like the kind of guy who'd carry this forever and never tell anyone. I didn't want you thinking it was your fault. It was a weird thing, Hearing kindness from a stranger after being gutted by someone I loved. After we hung up, I sat in silence for hours. No music, no lights. Just me and that little digital hum from the router. I kept expecting the pain to twist into rage. But it didn't. Not yet. What I felt was something worse, clarity. Rena wasn't impulsive. She was calculated. Cold. She had played the long game, and I had been the piece she'd planned to sacrifice. But what she hadn't expected, what none of them had expected, was that I'd withdraw, go quiet, and watch her entire scheme collapse in real time. That night, I pulled out a box she'd never seen. Inside were printed copies of every financial document we'd ever signed. I wasn't paranoid, just meticulous. She'd always teased me about it. You and your little paper trail, she used to say. No? That paper trail was my salvation. I checked every account, every signature, every digital receipt, and I found something I hadn't noticed before. The payment for the house's inspection? It hadn't come from our joint account. It had come from my old savings account, the one I hadn't touched in 2 years, the one she didn't even know I still had access to, which meant one thing. She'd used my login, my credentials, my trust, without my permission. And suddenly, this wasn't just betrayal. It was fraud. I didn't sleep that night. I lay there on the couch, surrounded by papers, flickering tabs, and the quiet hum of a ceiling fan that seemed louder than my thoughts, though barely. The moment I confirmed that Rena had accessed my dormant savings account without telling me, something inside me shifted. It was like flipping a coin in the dark and realizing it had landed on its edge, unstable, impossible, and dangerous. That account was mine before we even got engaged. I'd stopped using it because Rena pushed for us to combine finances, insisting it would make everything feel more real. At the time, it sounded romantic. Now it sounded like a chess move. And I was the pawn. I opened the bank's activity log and narrowed my eyes at the timeline. The withdrawal for the inspection had been made 3 days after I left town for my cousin's bachelor weekend in Cleveland, the same weekend, coincidentally, that she'd been at that Albany hotel. The same weekend where, I now suspected, a lot more happened than just a stolen kiss with Beau. So while I was playing poker with my cousins and drinking too much lukewarm beer, she was playing a much colder game. And she was already betting with money that didn't belong to her. I screen captured everything, printed out the bank records, timestamps, login IPs. I made a folder and labeled it for me. Not for revenge, not for some dramatic court battle, just so I wouldn't ever let myself forget how deep the manipulation had gone. The next morning, she texted again. Can we start over? I didn't reply. 2 hours later, another one. I made a mistake, Jace. I was scared. Still no reply. Then a voice memo. I didn't open it. Instead, I called my bank. I calmly explained that there had been unauthorized access to my old savings account and requested a formal inquiry. The woman on the other end, kind, southern accent, spoke like someone who crocheted on weekends, said she'd escalate the case to their fraud department. I didn't even have to lie. I gave them the dates, IP logs, everything. She thanked me for being thorough. That's when I realized. I wasn't being passive anymore. I was being precise. Around 3 p.m., the door buzzer rang. I didn't need to check the camera. I knew it was her. I let it buzz 3 more times before I opened the door. She stood there in gym clothes, no makeup, holding 2 coffees like this was some kind of indie film, and we just had a lover's quarrel. Thought you might want something warm, she said gently, her eyes scanning my face for any crack she could crawl through. I took the cup and said nothing. Inside, she sat down and folded her hands like she was waiting to be interviewed. Jace, I know you're hurt. I know I didn't handle things the right way. But this, us, it doesn't have to be over. We've been through so much, right? I took a sip of the coffee. It was lukewarm. Fitting. Who is Beau? I asked calmly. Her eyes flickered. I already told you, he's no one. You didn't tell me anything. You avoided the question. She bit her lip. He was a mistake. Just a stupid fling. It didn't mean anything. I looked directly at her. You accessed my savings account while I was out of town. You used money I didn't authorize to pay for something you intended to own without me. Her face went pale. You want to talk about mistakes? I asked. That wasn't a mistake. That was theft. I didn't mean it like that, she stammered. We were going to be married. What's mine is yours, right? I leaned forward. But we're not married. And you said we wouldn't be. She started crying. Not sobbing. Just those quiet, deliberate tears that feel more like a tactic than a breakdown. I panicked, she whispered. I thought you'd leave first. I thought you'd find out about Bo, and that was it. I stood up. So instead of being honest, you set me up. You thought you could get the house, ride the wave, and then decide whether you wanted to stay married or bail. She didn't respond. I've already filed a fraud report, I said quietly. Your name is in the documentation. She stood then, slowly, like her body had lost half its bones. You're not really going to do this, she said, voice trembling. I'm not doing anything, I replied. You already did. I handed her the voice memo she sent earlier, still unopened on my phone. You can say whatever you need to in there, I said, but I won't be listening. And with that, I walked to the window and stared outside, back turned as she left the apartment. I heard the door click shut. But the truth? It didn't feel like an ending. It felt like the beginning of something she wasn't prepared for. Because Bo wasn't her only secret, and Nolan wasn't the only one watching. After she left, I stood by the window for nearly 20 minutes. Not watching anything. Not thinking. Just standing there, my breath fogging up the glass, her voice still echoing faintly in my head. I should have felt powerful. I had confronted her. I had caught her in the lie. I had control. But somehow, all I felt was empty. Like I had put out the fire in the room only to find the walls were already ash. I went to the bedroom, sat on the edge of the mattress we once shared, and looked at the mess of papers and folders still covering the floor. Among them was something I hadn't noticed before, a manila envelope I must have pulled out while gathering the bank statements. It had no label, just a little circle scribbled in pen on the back. One of Rena's habits when she wanted to mark something private. Inside were printed pages. Lots of them. I flipped through them lazily at first, assuming it was another set of loan documents or old wedding vendor agreements. But then I saw something that made my mouth go dry. It was a spreadsheet, not a financial one. A list of names, dozens of them. Each name was followed by short, coded descriptions. Reliable but clingy, too cheap, already hooked someone else, good fallback if needed, and next to mine. Jace, safe, loyal, credit score 800 plus, emotionally avoidant but easy to control. My heart stopped. I read it again, and again, and again. It was real. It was her font, her language, her weird shorthand. The rest of the document was filled with similar notes, phone numbers, cities, even timelines, like she'd tracked interactions, responses, reactions. It was a social playbook, a twisted inventory of people she had dated, ghosted, or categorized like they were furniture. I wasn't a person to her. I was a column in a strategy. I couldn't breathe. My vision narrowed. I had to stand up and walk around the apartment just to stop my hands from shaking. This wasn't just about me anymore. It never had been. Rena wasn't heartbroken. She wasn't confused. She was methodical, calculated. She had been playing a long game, and I wasn't the first. I was just the one she thought would never find the scoreboard. I called Nolan again. He picked up immediately. There's more, I said without greeting. I found a list, like a literal list, with names, details, notes. I'm on it. He didn't sound shocked. She mentioned something like that once, he admitted. Joked about having dating stats. I thought it was just her being edgy. It's not a joke, I said coldly. It's organized. She had me marked from the start. There was a pause, then something shifted in Nolan's voice. I didn't want to tell you this before, but I wasn't the only one who saw her with Bo. There's another guy, Tommy. Works in HR. He told me last week that Rena had offered him $300 to look the other way about her visitor logs. Said it was just a friend, nothing serious. But she needed him to delete the record. I sat down slowly. The pit in my stomach stretched deeper. So she's been cleaning her tracks. She's been planning this, Nolan said. Longer than either of us realized. I thanked him and ended the call. Then I pulled out my laptop, created a folder, and started saving every file, every image, every document. I didn't know what I was building exactly. Not yet. But I knew I had to keep going. Around 11 p.m., another message came from Rena. I left something at your place. Please don't go through my stuff. Too late. I opened the second drawer of the cabinet where she kept her things. Inside was a locked leather notebook. Her manifestation journal, she called it. I never read it before. But now I broke the lock with a butter knife and turned to the first page. The entries weren't poems. They weren't dreams. They were goals, strategies, plans. Find someone with emotional vacancy but strong income. Play the long game. No confrontations. If discovered, reframe it as fear of abandonment. Never admit to guilt. Redirect to their failures. My name showed up again 3 pages in. She had predicted how I'd respond to the cancellation. She expected the silence. She expected the mortgage withdrawal. She just didn't expect me to keep going. I didn't cry that night. I didn't rage. I just sat there, holding a piece of her soul in my hands, realizing she never truly saw me as human. Just a stepping stone. A security plan. A phase. I backed up every file. Took pictures of every page. And in the early hours of the morning, I emailed a copy of the list to myself with a subject line that read, "Proof of pattern, for future use." I didn't know when I'd need it. But something told me, this wasn't over. Because people like Rena don't go quietly. And I was about to find out just how loud her desperation could get. The next day didn't begin so much as it resumed. I don't remember falling asleep. I don't remember waking up. It all felt like one long hour with no clock in sight. I shuffled from the kitchen to the couch in the same clothes I'd worn the day before. Coffee didn't help. Showers didn't help. Not even silence helped anymore. Everything was too loud. My thoughts, her voice, the memory of every time she smiled like I was the safest place she'd ever been. She knew exactly how to smile. That was the thing. She smiled with her whole face. The kind of smile you want to believe, even when something in your gut screams to look away. Now I realized that smile wasn't affection, it was control. Around 9:30 a.m., my phone buzzed. It was a video call. Rena. I stared at the screen for a moment. I didn't accept it, but I didn't decline either. Just let it ring until it timed out. 2 minutes later, she sent a message. If you really cared about any of this, you'd at least hear me out. I didn't respond. 5 more messages followed, each one more performative than the last. I know I hurt you, Jace. I didn't know how to fix it. I only kept that list because I was scared of being alone. Can't we at least try to end this with dignity? You're being cruel now. I didn't mean for this to go this far. I'm coming over. We need to talk face to face. That last one lit a fuse in my chest. I replied simply, don't. 15 minutes later, she knocked anyway. When I opened the door, I saw a version of her I hadn't expected. No makeup, hair tied back, wearing one of my old hoodies. It was intentional, calculated nostalgia. She was trying to look like the girl who used to curl up beside me on Sundays and fake interest in documentaries. But I wasn't the same man who used to fall for that. I just want to talk, she said softly. No, I said. You want to manage the fallout. That's different. She stepped inside without asking. I didn't stop her. I needed to see where she thought this would go. I know how this looks, she began, pacing like a TED Talk speaker trying to win the crowd. But it's not what you think. You're going to have to be more specific, I replied. Because I think it's fraud. I think it's manipulation. I think it's emotional conditioning over the course of a year. Am I wrong? She froze mid-step. You're not being fair. No, I said. I'm being exact. She sighed, lowering herself onto the couch like this whole situation exhausted her. Jace, I'm not the villain you're trying to make me out to be. Funny, I muttered. Because I've got a folder labeled villain behavior that says otherwise. That hit her. I could see the flinch ripple down her arms. She folded her hands in her lap like a student preparing for judgment. I didn't plan to hurt you. I swear. Bo was a mistake. A stupid, meaningless. He was never the point. I cut in. You using me was. She opened her mouth, but I didn't give her the space. You mapped me, Rena. Like a case study. You broke me down into categories and leveraged me as a tool for your stability. You calculated how I'd react to everything. You manipulated me into silence, then blamed that silence when I stopped being useful. You weren't supposed to find that list, she blurted, and then instantly regretted it. I raised an eyebrow. That's your takeaway? Her eyes began to water. I was scared you'd leave me if I didn't have a plan. You made me leave, I snapped. You executed the plan and called it panic. You rigged the entire relationship with an escape hatch already open. The silence between us thickened. Then she stood, slowly, carefully, like she was approaching a wild animal. I'll tell you what you want, she said. The truth. All of it. But only if you promise not to send anything to the police. That caught me off guard. Why would I do that? I asked carefully. She looked at me, tears now genuinely forming. Because Bo wasn't just a fling. He helped me open that account. My stomach twisted. What do you mean, it helped? She hesitated, and then it spilled out. He worked for the mortgage broker. He offered to accelerate the process if I used you. Your score. Your savings. We were supposed to split the house afterward and fake a separation. I'd keep the property. He'd get a referral bonus. You were never supposed to get hurt. That last sentence almost made me laugh. You teamed up with a stranger to rob me of my future, and you're calling it clean? I thought I could fix it before it went too far, she whispered. But you found everything. And now he's threatening me. I stared at her. And for the first time in this entire twisted mess, I realized something I hadn't before. Rena wasn't in control anymore. She was scared. Not of me, but of Bo. I sat in stunned silence after Rena dropped Bo's name again, not as a fling, not as a mistake, but as an accomplice. It reframed everything. Bo wasn't just some smooth-talking opportunist she got tangled up with on a lonely weekend in Albany. He was in on it. A player. A partner. A co-conspirator. And now, apparently, a threat. Rena stood in the middle of my living room, arms crossed, hoodie sleeves pulled over her trembling hands. She didn't look manipulative anymore. She looked cornered, like someone who built a house of cards too high and watched it collapse in one gust of truth. Bo said he had connections with the mortgage firm, she said, voice low, almost shaking. He offered to fast-track the approval if I brought him a high-credit applicant who wouldn't ask questions. That was you. I swallowed the rising bile. And the plan was what, exactly? I asked. You fake the relationship, get the loan, dump me, keep the house, split profits with him? She winced like I'd slapped her. It wasn't fake, she whispered. Not all of it. I stared at her. That's supposed to be comforting? Her voice cracked. I thought I could handle it, that I'd find a way to make it right. But then he started asking for more, pressuring me. He wanted me to go through with the marriage. Said if we were legally married, it'd lock in more protections. Said you wouldn't even notice what was happening. I didn't even know what emotion to feel anymore. Rage and disbelief were playing tug-of-war in my chest, but there was something deeper beneath both. Disgust. Not just at her, but at myself. For not seeing it. For trusting so blindly. I started getting texts from numbers I didn't recognize, she continued. Threats. Weird voicemails with no words. Just breathing. Bo said if I backed out, he'd report me for fraud, tank both our lives, tell your family everything. He's unhinged, Jace. I don't even know his real last name. I narrowed my eyes. And you came here? Why? Because I don't know what to do, she said. Because I think I made a deal with someone dangerous. And now he's turning on me. I thought you deserved to know. You're the only one who ever, her voice cracked, saw me as anything worth saving. I almost laughed at the irony. You want me to save you? She said nothing. I stood and walked past her toward the kitchen, needing to put something solid between us. My mind raced, trying to untangle this grotesque knot of betrayal, greed, and now, threat. If what she was saying was true, this wasn't just emotional manipulation anymore. This was legal, maybe even criminal. I opened my drawer and pulled out the flash drive I'd backed everything onto. The list. The transaction logs. The forged logins. The notebook scans. I held it up. I was going to take this to the police, I said. She nodded slowly, tears streaming now. But now I think it might be safer to go higher. She looked confused. What do you mean? Bo's not just a con man. If he has access inside a mortgage company, he's part of something bigger. If he's done this once, he's probably done it a dozen times. You think you're the only one who played decoy? Her mouth fell open. I didn't even think. No, I cut her off. You didn't. You were too busy playing predator to realize you were being hunted too. There was a knock at the door. Both of us froze. One knock. Firm. Precise. I looked through the peephole. No one was there. My spine went rigid. I opened the door just an inch, nothing. But there, taped to the outside of the door, was a single white envelope. No markings. No stamps. I pulled it down slowly and opened it. Inside was a printed screenshot of my apartment's lease agreement, with one sentence scrawled in red Sharpie across the top. You're asking the wrong questions. There was no signature. No return address. I looked back at Rena, who now looked white as a sheet. Her knees buckled slightly, and she slumped into the armchair. He knows where you live, she whispered. He knows you're involved now. I nodded, folding the paper back into the envelope. And that means he's scared. She looked at me, confused. If he was really in control, I said, he wouldn't be warning us. He'd be acting. What do we do? She asked, voice small. I stared at the envelope again, then turned back toward the flash drive. We give him a reason to act. Her eyes widened. What does that mean? It means we lay a trap. I opened my laptop, plugged in the flash drive, and began drafting an email. Not to the police. Not yet. To someone higher. Someone who investigates patterns. I typed the subject line slowly, deliberately. Urgent. Mortgage fraud pattern involving internal collusion. Multiple parties at risk. And then I hit send. Rena looked like she might throw up. But me? I finally felt calm. Because for the first time in this entire mess, I wasn't reacting. I was moving. And the fallout was just beginning. The days that followed were a blur of cold coffee, quiet tension, and cautious strategy. I didn't leave my apartment unless I had to. I didn't answer unknown numbers. I double-checked every lock, scanned the street before stepping outside, and made digital copies of every single piece of evidence, stored on 3 different encrypted drives, one of which I mailed to my cousin across the country without telling anyone. I didn't tell Rena where I'd sent it. I didn't even tell her where I work now. Not because I wanted revenge, but because, for the first time in years, I was protecting me. The agency I reported Bo to, along with the bundled documents, timelines, and screenshots, replied 2 days later. It wasn't flashy. No sirens. No agents at my door. Just a short, professional email that began with, "Thank you for your detailed submission. This is not the first report we've received about this individual." That line hit like a quiet earthquake. I wasn't the first. I wouldn't be the last. But maybe, I was the one who finally gave them enough to move. The next time Rena showed up, she didn't look smug or scared. She looked hollow, empty in a way that wasn't fake anymore. "They found him," she said, standing just outside my doorway. "Bo, or whatever his real name is. He's been picked up." I got a call from an investigator. I nodded. She didn't ask to come in. She just stood there, wringing her hands. "I'm not here to beg," she added. "I just wanted to say I'm sorry. Not for getting caught, but for everything. For treating people like tools. For turning trust into leverage." I didn't say anything at first. Just watched her. Not with hate. Not even with anger. Just distance. She took a breath. "I'm moving. Getting out of the city. Taking a job with my sister's company upstate. I need to rebuild. Somewhere quiet." I still didn't speak. "I know you probably don't believe me," she said, taking a small step back, "but you were the only person who ever made me feel safe. And I ruined that." This time, I nodded once. "Goodbye, Jace." She left. Just like that. No drama. No fanfare. Just the sound of her footsteps disappearing down the hallway. And me, still standing at the edge of my old life, staring into something new. It's been 7 months now. The house was never purchased. The mortgage process collapsed, and the lender quietly reached out to me once to offer a very careful apology and assurance that the employee in question was no longer with the company. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. The wedding date came and went like a ghost train, quiet, fast, and forgotten. That day I took myself to the mountains. Alone. No phone, no emails. Just wind, pine, and a sky so wide it felt like a reset button. I've started over. Not completely. Some scars don't fade that easily. But I changed jobs, moved to a smaller apartment, got a new cat, this one actually mine, and I started therapy. Real therapy. Not just coping. Understanding. And something happened in the middle of all that change. I began to forgive myself. Not her. Me. For ignoring my gut. For tolerating less than I deserved. For shrinking so someone else could feel bigger. For mistaking control for connection. A few weeks ago, I met someone. I'm not rushing. I'm not diving into romance like a lifeline. We've gone on 2 dates. She laughs at her own jokes, drinks hot chocolate in summer, and doesn't try to finish my sentences. It feels real. And that's more than enough for now. If you're reading this and you've been used, lied to, or twisted into someone you don't recognize, just know, your silence isn't weakness. Your stillness isn't surrender. Sometimes the quietest steps are the strongest ones. Because I didn't scream. I didn't rage. I just walked away. And that made all the difference.